mean, what Dr. Jung was talking about is in order to be sane and in the human community, you have to bring that stuff up, but then you have to
express it in
you
a
have
way,
to yes
right?
you have to express it,
And not
but
stuff
you
it.
also have to balance it against the world in which you live, right?
What's acceptable within
I mean,
the culture.
As long as you're alive, you must be balancing it.
that's what he's saying, sure. And you know, children are wild animals when they're born. Okay, they don't know anything about society. They're totally instinctual beings, and so we teach them, you know, almost from the time they're born, about how to live and how to be humans, as does every species. I mean,
But unlike a wild animal, they want to be taught. They want to please you.
right? They want to please you. They want to understand, and they're a collective animal, like Ron Franz is talking about, where the tendency of the psyche is to go into these 10 to 50 person groups where it's both good for the individual and good for the group. Okay, and so what do we do in, let's say, the Marine Corps? In the Marine Corps, we have platoons. A platoon has 50 men in it. And so what's good for the man is good for the platoon, and vice versa. And so in that environment, you know, you learn how to be in that environment, and why it's good to have, you know, a fire team leader and so on. But I think that, you know, the point is that we have a lot of stuff, a lot of dark stuff, obviously, coming up in society right now, but also globally. And I don't know what will happen, but it's going to be interesting.
Apparently there's still quite a bit of repression.
Oh, there's a lot of repression. There's lots of pushback.
By the official government and so on.
Right.
Individual expression. And so
Sure, and we're seeing lots of repression, and we're seeing it in our society too. I mean, you know, just look at the pushback from having a woman candidate for president. Okay, there's huge pushback.
We thought it was bad for a black guy. This is
Pardon?
even worse. We thought it was bad pushback for a black guy. Now we've got a woman doing it, and they're even more hostile.
Oh, right, and
That's amazing to me.
yeah, and you know, so as a result, we have lots of acting out coming up.
Jung didn't go that far. He just said Jung did not go that far.
He did not go as far as what?
Saying what you do with it. He just said you just do it, and then your life will correct. There will be corrections made.
Well, let me read the next paragraph of her, which, okay, so here's Marie Louise. She says, this does not mean, of course, we're talking about the 50-person group here, 10 to 50-person group. This does not mean, of course, that there will not be collisions of opinion and conflicting obligations or disagreements about the right way, in the face of which one must constantly withdraw and listen to one's inner voice in order to find the individual standpoint that the self intends one to have. Okay, and so what this means in terms of individuation is when you find that you're contrary to the group, then you have to decide for yourself what's right, and you know, this is personal morality, and this is what we need, of course. And you know, there's going to be a lot of individuation going on over that tape that came out last Friday. Okay, because right after that, I put a tweet out saying, "Oh, by the way, I've never heard this in the Marine Corps, in any locker room I've ever been in high school, or in a men's college. I've never heard anything like this before. This is not locker room talk and anything I've ever experienced." Okay, and so maybe that's news to a lot of people who want to believe that it is locker room talk, and that's what it should be. I definitely have been trying to avoid
I know you
political discussion.
because I know
Okay?
you like it. I know.
And well, I not only like it, it is a a main driving force in my life, and I've actually written a book called Political Psychology. So you know, it is a mainstream thing for
I'll
me.
try to get a thicker
But
skin, okay?
yeah,
I don't like politics at all, and I don't even
well,
discuss
you know,
it. But
they
I will discuss behavior.
right, and you know, they say that, you know, in social groups you should avoid two topics, politics and religion. But the problem is, if you're going to talk about Jung, you do have to talk about politics and religion, because religion was the fundamental thing that drove his life from age 11 to age 85. And actually he has some tremendous insights on the psychology.
Two world wars.
Pardon?
He
Yeah.
also went through those 2 world wars that kind of shaped his thinking.
Right, sure.
He said that he had that dream about World War I coming with all the blood and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, he had that dream in like 1913 or something.
Yeah, he had it at Christmas of
What's the big
1913.
deal? Anybody who's tied into what was going on in the world would have absorbed all of what was going on, and it could have been predicted like 5-10 years.
No, I'm not so sure. You know, people didn't realize, even after the Archduke Ferdinand was murdered, that it would lead to the conflagration that it did.
Well, the degree of it, yes.
The degree of it, okay, and
That's a good point.
you know, actually, you know, they thought that there would be some bloodletting, but they never imagined the carnage that would happen in the trenches of France. No way did anybody think that.
Well, when did Hitler
I mean, not
start
consciously.
talking-
Not
when
consciously.
did Hitler start talking about eradicating Nazis? I mean, Jews. What year was that?
1923. He started talking about it in Mein Kampf.
Yeah.
And but nobody believed him, and everybody thought he was a joke. Okay.
Well, what I've always heard is when someone says something, believe it.
Right.
You know,
but
they're telling
but when
you what they are.
when Hitler was with 7 guys around a table, I mean, just like this, we're 5 people around the table, and we start talking about some movement, and things move, okay, and so all of a sudden it hits something that's in the unconscious that you're not aware of, you're not conscious of. I don't think anybody in Germany was necessarily conscious, although Dr. Jung said that from his patients from 1919, he knew that another war was coming from 1919. So the war ended November 11th, 1918. By 1919, Dr. Jung is talking to people in his consulting room, and he's realizing that there's going to be another war. And you know, maybe Hitler thought there was going to be another war because he wanted to have world domination, and he and his cronies wanted to do that from the time they were in Landsberg prison. But I'm not sure. But I'm not sure many Nazis, people who were Nazis, thought about that then. And certainly in 1933, you know, mind you, Adolf Hitler was not elected by a great majority. He was elected by, I don't know, 23% of the vote or something like that. But he was elected by one of the parties. I mean, they didn't work the same way as we work. So his party won the most votes, so they got to put together a government, and you know, the Weimar Republic made Hitler chancellor of that republic. But then he changed things. Okay, and so I don't think anybody who voted for him in 1933 expected that all the crockery would be destroyed in Dresden 10 years later. Okay? Not by any means. And they never imagined the unconscious uprush of archetypal things that came up over that 10-year period. And so there's lots of ebb and flow. And so the reason I wanted to look at this was not to talk about our stuff per se, but to talk about what Von Franz says here, which is that, you know, all this propaganda that you get, it never changes anything. It doesn't change anything. If anything, it only represses what's in the unconscious. And so what will ultimately emerge is what's inside us, you know, what's in our psyche. And so, you know, whether we're an individual fighting our own mental health issue, or whether we're a society fighting a mental health issue, it's really not much different. If we repress it, it's going to come up anyway. Okay. And so what Dr. Jung said in Civilization in Transition is the only thing that gave him any hope for the future. And mind you, he was in a very dark time in the late 50s. Was the dissension in the Western democracies, because what we do is we beat each other up in our debates and our tendency to debate. And so, yeah, it looks ugly, but oh, by the way, the results are okay. They're not so bad. Okay, we say we're the greatest country. Well, in some ways we are. I mean, in that way we are, because we have every idea in the world coming here, and every good idea we adopt, and every bad idea we ignore. Huh? Ideally. I mean, sometimes it takes time. It took us 250 years to get rid of slavery, right? And they're still trying to bring it back, and they have brought it back in one form, which is these private prisons now, where, you know, we've got global corporations that are getting work at 23 cents an hour because they've got all these kids in prison, and so they're basically getting slave labor. I mean, they couldn't get it cheaper if they owned the kids, right? They'd still have to buy them food and stuff. And so basically we have modern slavery in the form of the private prison system.
We subsidize it.
And we subsidize it, right? And so we're only now, like this year, figuring out that, you know, maybe this isn't so good. Okay, the federal government has now thrown out private prisons, and they're phasing them out. But the state governments have to still do that, and it's going to take years. It'll probably take 20, 30 years. And obviously there are a lot of people who have investments in those companies that are doing that, and so they don't want them to stop. Anyway, the point I wanted to make, which is, you know, a very interesting aspect about this 3 pages, is that basically Von Franz is saying it really doesn't matter what's in these televised debates and stuff, and in political propaganda for either side, because we are what we are. We are, as a people, we are what we are. As a conglomeration, this is what Dr. Jung was talking about, alchemy. You know, alchemically, we're 310 million minds that every year or every 4 years we create a new country, or every 2, you know, we're constantly, every day we're creating a new country. And it's worked pretty well for us over the 240 years that the country's been in existence. You know, I mean, we have our warts, no doubt about it. but we're a lot better than Turkey, let's say, where, you know, if you disagree with the government in Turkey, they do throw you in jail.
Skip, I have a general question about what Jung was saying with regard to this psychic energy, basically, of millions of people who are repressing something. He gave the example of a really beautiful essay called Women in Europe. You read that?
Yeah, in fact, that's the essay of which this quote comes from.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's saying that because a lot of the male population was wiped out in World War I, there was going to be this problem because there were so many single women who couldn't find husbands, and that was going to just like be pushed down into their subconscious and the millions, and that was going to manifest itself as a destruction of the institution of marriage in those countries. It was going to undermine the married women. I don't think he ever says later, did he ever write whether it did manifest itself? I mean, you don't really hear anything about this.
I think he believed that it did. I mean, obviously it did, because the men just went off to war again. Okay, and the young men, the young men that were coming up in those years in the 20s, were kids that were in the Hitler Youth. And everybody thought, oh, this is great, this is Boy Scouts, you know. But they were separating the boys and the girls, and they were telling the girls that they were going to be, you know, pregnant milkmaids, basically. And the boys were going to be He-Man hero warriors, and we're going to avenge our fathers. That's what they were telling them. And so they basically did destroy the family in Germany during that period. And, you know, all the soldiers went off to war from basically, I guess, from 1937. I mean, I don't remember when he went into Sudetenland and those places, but I mean, the war officially started September 1st, 1939, but that was with the invasion of Poland. But he had already, by then, I mean, he had built up the army. So everybody was doing a lot of marching around and building airplanes and that sort of stuff in the early 30s. And then he cut off all dissent. Okay, it's even within his own group, you know, like Rome, who was the head of the SA, you know, he just grabbed all the heads of the SA and shot them. You know, they went up to the wall saying Heil Hitler as they're being shot. He withdrew into alchemy, basically. I mean, at the beginning of the war. By the beginning of the war, he was seriously into alchemy. So he was looking for something that was much deeper, okay? Much deeper than, you know, behavioral stuff.
Okay.
And if we look at the war and his development toward the war, it was unstoppable. Okay, the only way that what was happening psychically in Germany was ended was they were finally unequivocally defeated. Okay, only then, only when the country was totally destroyed did the war end. It didn't end because everybody came to their senses. Nobody came to their senses. You know, they didn't come to their senses. I mean, do you dispute that? I mean, in Japan too. I mean, in Japan, the people were ready to have 15-year-old girls out on the beaches with spears made out of bamboo to fight off an American invasion. That's what was going to happen if we didn't drop. Yeah, it was all or nothing. And so these great psychic epidemics that occurred were incurable. They were incurable.
So can we make a leap to modern times in our country as an example, and maybe just because I grew up in a different way, but I notice younger people are more virtual.
Are more what?
More virtual.
Virtual,
There
yeah.
isn't so much face-to-face communication.
Yeah.
Is that going to cause some kind of repression? Will it manifest itself somehow? I mean, I'm trying to get
It is going to manifest. It is manifesting. I mean, it's manifesting right now with everybody going around staring at their hand, right? But it will manifest, and in 10 years we'll know whether this generation will have families. I don't know.
The biggest, broadest thing I got out of that research I did was that when using the technologies, the women created relationships. They created art that involved relationships with other people, whereas the men were sort of muscular, let's say. They wanted to assert something technological. So they oftentimes went for, it's like you go to a ballet and some people go, oh, look at the artistry, and some people go, wow, did you see that jump? That was so athletic. Well, these guys were going for the athletic, whereas the women were going for the relationships created with the art. So that in itself, that was one of the effects of the technology. It you saw people channeling whatever it was, through the technology. So now we see it in the virtuality. In the virtual world, I assume women are creating relationships, whereas the guys are asserting themselves.
We see it in the United States, where we see the patriarchy pushing back against a female presidential candidate, okay? Definitely pushing back. And so that's what's happening in that part of the world. And so the patriarchy, even worse than the United States, way worse, but in that part of the world, there's so much more repression. I mean, there are pictures of Syria, let's say, from the time of Lawrence of Arabia, okay, where the Syrian women, the Iraqi women were running around. They weren't in hijab at that time, okay? They were dancing, singing. They were happy people, and they've all been repressed down, repressed down, repressed down. So that's serious repression, and there's push against it. But and it's the masculine, feminine. It's all these issues that Dr. Jung was.
And exaggerated.
And it's magnified by
the bullying and online stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've seen two different things here. I'm talking primarily about cell phones and computers in this country actually interfering with human intimacy, or is it the opposite? Or is it the opposite? It just seems to me.
Well, it does both.
That would create a tremendous push down.
Well, imagine you're in a small town in the 1800s and you're a young woman or a young guy, and there's 6 families. That's pretty repressive, especially if you want. Whereas now you've got millions of people in date sites, for example.
Right.
So you could look at it in terms of there's less repression because of this, the technology, and there's more repression because there's so little selection and borderline incestuous relationships, everything else here. So
You got two people on a date looking at their cell phones instead of each other. That's my point.
My son brought up an article. He said in Japan, the number of marriages has plummeted. He said,
What has plummeted?
the number of marriages in Japan.
Right.
And he said, he goes, do you realize this? He goes, people are so on the phone all the time that they don't know how to talk to girls.
Yeah.
And they're scared, so guys talk to guys or they just text everybody. And the human interaction thing, they're so afraid. So they don't go out they don't get to know anyone, no dating, no marriage, no families. And they said, it's it. So yeah, we're more
But this too
connected
will
to millions
change,
of
right?
people.
All these problems come up and then they're resolved.
What did they have? They had an app. I saw this and I went, Really? I think, where did I see that? It said this is the, I forget, it had a quirky name, but a guy it was a blind date. He's sitting there with this woman, his phone goes, and he says, oh, excuse me, emergency at work, I have to go. It was a fake. It was a fake emergency call that you do over here. You go like this. If she's not fun, they go, is she boring?
Yeah.
Is she telling you about her last boyfriend or her boring job or
Right.
whatever? You know, go like this, and the phone goes, ching, and there it is, and you're out of there.
Well, that's efficient.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's an app. It's a real phone app
right.
to
But
get
it's-
you out of. Yeah.
But it also, you might be escaping from yourself more than from the other person.
Yes. Yeah. But we're just talking about attention spans, like those Vine videos, 7 seconds.
Right.
And all the cooking stuff. The cooking videos are like 20 seconds long,
Right.
and they're hyperlapse with the directions on there. And they said, if you want, you can go here.
Or you
to
can
go
go
look it
slow. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Or you
question
can read
is
it.
though, is this is, you know,
Scary.
it's phenomena that we're talking about, but is it going to, are there going to be repercussions?
Sure there
or
are.
not? I mean,
Of course there are.
Weird
I
in
mean,
20
technology
years.
won't change, right? It'll get even more sophisticated.